And we got involved in the drought contingency plan and some other things, so we kind of hit pause, and now we're going to reconvene and try to move forward. Let's get started by doing some introductions. I can start, and we can go around the table, and then we'll go around the outside of the room. I'm Philip Richards with APS.
Patrick Adams here on behalf of AMWA.
Wade Noble, Yuma County Agriculture Water Coalition.
Zach Richards, ADWR.
Cindy Rule, ADWR.
My name's Dee Quaritch. I'm the Chief Hydrologist at Tucson Water. I'm here in place of John Kamik, who was formerly the Director at Marana and is now the Deputy Director at Tucson Water.
Very good.
Bill Garfield, Arizona Water Company.
I'm Susan Craig. I'm with the ASU's Kyle Center for Water Policy for Sarah Porter.
Thanks, Susan. Let's start here.
I'm Haley Paul with Audubon, Arizona.
I'm Scott Miller with APS.
Adrian Sutter, EPS.
Melody Lawyer, Tucson Water.
Pam Hughes, Land Department.
Jeff Gray, CAP.
Martin Stiles, ADWR.
Patrick Cunningham at High Ground.
Richard Carson on Water Group.
Dallas Myron, Veritas.
Jeremy Gerlach, Veritas.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we thought a good way to get started was by reminding everyone where the last group left off. It's been a year and a half. We probably have new information, and we probably have forgotten a few things that happened between then and now. And Zach has volunteered to do that for us, so thank you, Zach. Take it away. When you're ready.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
That's right. This.
Got it. Let me exit out of that thing. Okay. Alrighty. So, I'm going to give a brief overview of, very brief overview of what had occurred with the last Desalination Committee, 2016 to 2018. So we're just kind of condensing almost 3 years of work into this quick snapshot. So when the Arizona Water Initiative first kicked off, we had the Governor's Water Augmentation Council, which then, similar to what we just had occur with the GWAICC, break off into several different committees. I headed Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee, along with the Desalination Committee, and then Martin Stiles behind me here at Recycled Water and Finance Committees. Tracked attendance in 2017 for the committees and the GWAICC, and attendance was pretty consistent for the committees throughout that time, anywhere between a low of 13 individuals to a high of 23. We first began our meetings talking about what has already been done. Desalination Committee had a study to go off of, which was from Montgomery & Associates back in 2008, and this was prepared for the Central Arizona Water Conservation District. This map here was taken from an even earlier study done by Deborah Daniels with ADWR back in the 1980s, where she put a map together that displayed some of the higher TDS levels for brackish water supply throughout the state. And so you can see some of those areas in red and orange were kind of areas that Montgomery Associates were taking a closer look at and to regards their feasibility for brackish water desalination. Some of the highest TDS levels are found in that northeastern portion there, the area near the sea aquifer. And then we also have areas over by Safford, this little block here, and then all along the Gila River as it makes its way towards Yuma and into the Colorado River. And then in this report they broke down less promising areas, potentially promising, and most promising. They kind of filtered it down to just these 6 options here up top in green. So I mentioned the Winslow Loop area, being one of those most promising areas, along with the Wilcox Basin, Costa Eloy, Yuma Mesa and Yuma Valley, Gila Bend, and the Buckeye Waterlogged area. Some presentations were given by myself, Chuck Collins from CAP, and Richard Humphreys from Carollo. We began first with just looking at what's been done across the world with desalination plants, and some things to just be aware of and look out for. For example, the demand, making sure the demand is there for a desalination plant, and making sure that we have contractors that are aware of what the expectations are. Like, we don't want a situation like in Tampa Bay, where a contractor comes in to build the plant and then they're constantly failing inspections, go bankrupt, and have to keep on getting new contractors to finish the job. It's just an example of some things we were looking for that we wanted to avoid. The Winslow Loop area was something that we covered earlier just to see whether or not that was a feasible area. And Chuck Collin went over what's been done and study-wise with investigations into groundwater desalination in the Yuma area. And then the Buckeye Waterlogged area was overviewed by Richard Humphreys with Carollo, whether or not that area could actually provide for Buckeye as it builds out, or maybe other water users in the area. And we also had Hugo from our department come in to talk about a study being done as to whether or not the waterlogged area could continue to be designated as a waterlogged area past 2025. We haven't yet got a clear answer on that, but we'll go over as to why that's important in a moment. And then we had EWM, Environment Water Minerals, come in to talk about what they did in El Paso. They have something called full recovery desalination. It's like a zero discharge is what they hype it up as, but basically it's taking the brine and then separating the brine out into separate minerals that can be then sold on the market as a raw good. So that's an option for brine disposal, essentially. Some of the conclusions that we came up with, first we had this project timeline from 2017 going out to 2027 that gives us roughly like a 10-year estimate for what it would take to actually complete the desalination project, including things like the design, the contracts, environmental review, financing, and approvals for regulations. Construction actually takes up just a smaller fraction. The blue chart there that you see, obviously you can't read it from there, but we sent out a copy of this via email to folks for them to kind of review before they came to this meeting. I also printed out a few hard copies for folks here on the table.
It's also on the website.
It's also on the website under the Arizona Water Initiative, correct?
Yes, under the Governor's Water Council.
Got it. So feel free to take a look at it there. But just to kind of run through some of these items real quick, I kind of highlighted some areas on my chart here to just bring your attention to them.
I have that also as a PDF.
Yeah, we can bring that up. Sure, that's fine. So the Yuma Brackish groundwater mound was kind of put at the top of the list because it was determined to be one of the lower hanging fruits. The sustainability of supply in that first column there, even though we have a 75,000 acre-feet per year supply, the recharge is dependent on the continued existence of agriculture. Some of the local issues that we might have are just negative perceptions on augmenting Colorado River water for benefits outside of Yuma. So we want to make sure that there's benefits locally.
Zach, I'm not sure that that is appropriately stated.
Okay.
It's not negative perceptions. It is outright resistance.
Outright resistance. I'll just write here, full-on rebellion. Okay.
I was wondering if Wade was awake.
Could we
Gotcha.
maybe pause for a second, since many of us
Yeah.
were unescorted and
Okay.
came up by ourselves?
Okay.
But we had quite a few join the room here, and if you would give us just a second to do introductions, is that where you're headed?
Yeah.
Chuck? And then also, I forgot about the two on the phone, if they'd like to introduce them.
5 now.
Oh, there's 5 on the phone now. So let's start with those in the room. Chuck, would you like to start the introduction?
Sure. This is Chuck Cullum, Colorado River Programs Manager for the Central Arizona Project.
Let's go around with everybody.
Garfield, I don't.
Yeah.
Susan Craig, ASU's Kyle Center for Water Policy here for Sarah.
Jamie Kelly, Mojave County Water Authority.
Philip Richards, APS.
Rick Obenchain, EPCOR.
Patrick Adams, AMWA.
Bill Plummer.
Wade Noble, Yuma.
Zach Richards, AWR.
Cindy Rule, ADWR.
Dee Corridge here for John Kamik.
Good.
MU's Land Department.
Melody Lawyer, Tucson Water.
Reed Blocker with SRB.
Adrian Soder, APS.
Scott Miller with APS.
Lauren Kendriva with Irwin Goodwin Associates. Sealy Paul with Audubon, Arizona.
Susanna Burgos with City of Glendale.
Association of Arizona.
Drew Swiskowski, City of Glendale.
Jeremy Gerlach, Veritas.
Dallas Myron, Veritas.
Jim Rozier with Jacobs.
Richard Carr, Soren Martin. Doug Cross, High Ground Public Affairs.
Patrick Cunningham, High Ground.
Martin Stiles, ADWR. Jeff Gray, CUP.
Okay.
Can I'm sorry, you were going to go to the phone.
Phone, yeah. Would the individuals on the phone like to introduce themselves?
This is John Rasmussen with Reclamation.
Dylan Neese, Brown and Caldwell. I'm filling in for Rob McCandless.
Jennifer Martin here.
Sharon Carpenter, House Policy Staff.
That's 4 out of 5. That's pretty good.
Yeah, one of them's not announcing themselves. She's
Okay, very
in
good.
the office, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
And then, Chuck, did you have something else?
Yeah.
DOR is already on here.
Sorry. In Veritas, what is that?
Veritas
Yeah.
is a lobbying firm. Lobbying firm?
Contract lobbying firm. We represent Walton Mohawk Irrigation Drainage District, roads and communities.
All right. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Please continue.
Moving along here. Desalination plant to bypass drain. So many of you might know that there's already an existing Yuma desalination plant that's been there since for several decades. BOR is now in control of that facility. To utilize this facility would require some political capital to seek appropriations of real money from basin states and Mexico to bring this plant up to modern technology.
Where are we on this?
This is
Second to the
under
last, the
regulatory.
last column.
Last one, yeah. So it's that at the bottom here. There you go. There's also considerations for non-governmental organizations that may ask for environmental study onto the impact that it would have on the Cienega de Clara if we divert that water that typically goes into that wetland into the desalination plant for other uses. And I'll move to the Winslow Loop area next. I think we'll stay on like local issues for that one, so it'll be the second to the last. Yeah. So for the Winslow Loop area, so and again that pertains to that area that is near Winslow, north of Winslow, up into the Navajo chapters, southern portion there, the southern chapter. That whole area has kind of like this big blob that signifies some really high TDS brackish groundwater there. Now, we've seen studies done by the BOR for the Navajo Nation where they point to a serious accessibility issue for many citizens of the Navajo Nation to have that water. Many people spend quite a bit more money per gallon of water than we might because they have to drive several miles to have access to water. And a lot of times the quality of the water isn't that spectacular either. So we were trying to determine whether or not this is a service we'll be able to offer folks in that area. But there's obviously possible water settlement implications there as to ownership of the groundwater in that area. And would we put the plant on leased land, or will we have to put it outside of reservation? That's something that is very questionable. And both in legal and regulatory issues, unresolved claims of Federal Reserve rights to the groundwater, and it's questionable whether or not the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority accepts the use of brackish water supply and its compatibility with the Indian Health Service sanitary deficiency. Any effort to resolve any potential conflicts and reach consensus would be undertaken during the feasibility stage.
Give a timeline, Zach, on resolving those Federal Reserve right claims.
I do not.
That's a great
That was
question.
a loaded question, sorry.
I think Senator...
know the answer.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, all right, yeah. But the last that I had seen when I was looking at this situation, which was a few years ago, so I can't really say this is pertaining to personally, but Senator McCain had written a letter offering, potential service for helping to resolve those settlement implications, but there hasn't been a whole lot of traction on that front. And then for the last three, we had Gila Bend and
Zach, just a second, one comment about the Winslow Loop. Right, we did a lot of work or some work up there a number of years ago.
Yep.
You mentioned that the water is very brackish. It's brackish, very brackish from the Little Colorado River east, and the further you go west from the Colorado River, the lower the TDS goes. It gets close to acceptable if you get further west you go. Over near the crater, and it gets pretty good water.
yeah.
It's not the matter that you started. I think the least of the problems was that area.
Right.
Yeah, I think the highly saline water kind of makes this diagonal approach from a little bit east of Winslow and then up past Loop, north of Loop actually. Yeah, we can take a look at that in the map if we'd like to. So for Gila Bend, obviously an issue there is that the water table has dropped nearly 100 feet in the last 30 to 40 years. So the sustainability of the supply doesn't seem that promising. And the ownership of the land there is, highly protected. Many end users are not within a close proximity. And that probably a 50-mile pipeline that could add $100 million to the cost. For the Wilcox Playa, again, a sustainability issue as there's just not enough recharge to compensate for the current withdrawal rates of that groundwater. So the withdrawal rates that I had listed here was about 200,000 acre-feet per year, whereas recharge rate tends to be 20,000 acre-feet per year. For the Picacho Eloy area, many of you have probably heard or seen other people are in the news about the fissure issues in that area. There could be a worsening of those fissures if we were to draw groundwater out of that area. Also, there is no foreseen end user with an immediate need in the area.
Pardon? There's no shortage of water in the Pinal AMA?
Well, the original idea was it says here 10 to 20 miles to the CAP canal. So we're just trying to think of ways to just get that water to an end user somehow. If we have to do some brainstorming as to how to make that happen. And the same issue with like up in the Navajo Nation, it was like, well, it's an obvious need there, but to get the water to them is like kind of a whole different story. You can't have like the infrastructure there to make it happen. So that's something we can revisit.
So Zach, are you describing 10,000 acres per year that would be put into the Cap Canal and sent outside the Pinal AMA? Is that sort of the theory on this, or not stirring up trouble here, Zach? Just
yeah.
Zach.
The way in which the theory was since if you put a plant where the expression of the brackish groundwater is, there doesn't appear to be substantial development in that area. So to get someone, a customer, the closest conveyance would be
the Cap Canal.
And then it can go anywhere in the service area, including within the Pinal AMA.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah.
Captain Obvious there.
Thank you for humoring me there, Zach. Appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. No worries.
And you got entertainment out of it at the same time?
So that kind of is a brief overview of that chart there. Through all our conversations and studies and research that we've done. And so it's kind of shifting the torch over to Philip and the committee here to determine how to.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good intro for the next topic to discuss each of these target areas with the understanding that each of them have their challenges. Without the challenges, we wouldn't need this committee, so I think it's fair to say we just need to take a look at each one, maybe revise these if we have new information, and then try to determine which challenges we want to take on as a committee. Do we want to go through each one? And Cindy, is there a possibility of revising this document as we go through it? Do we have an editable document?
Okay. Would you do that? This is a PDF.
Yeah, so.
Or we can discuss them and edit it later, if that's easier.
I can access the Excel sheet.
Should we do that?
Yeah.
And we can add Wade's comment to the first one about resistance.
What desalting methods were considered in these programs?
Just RO or others as well?
So some of these have quite a bit of work that went into them. And so it got down to almost a preliminary design phase to where they did, select or at least propose different desalination options. But I'm not so sure at this point that there isn't other, treatment options available.
Other than RO.
I think if you've got something in mind, please put it on the table.
But I'm aware there are different ways, different methods.
Sure.
That different sources of energy required, so just wondering if those were considered earlier.
I don't know of any. I'll leave it at that.
Well, in some of the background work in the West Salt River Valley, in particular, folks, some previous studies in the early 2000s considered EDR, RO, thermal, the thermal approaches, and concluded that RO was the least cost alternative in that space. Because we didn't couple with any of the studies, didn't couple with any of the plants in that area, the thermal plants, electrical generating plants, which are relatively small, and except for Palo Verde, peak plants rather than base load.
Like the Buckeye and Palo Verde.
I would let APS describe their views on having a thermal plant, thermal distillation at Palo Verde.
It's something we can look at.
So one thought, Phil, is it just having gone through this list for a while, previously, it might be helpful for the committee to identify what they think the sort of pinch point or the critical issue that restricts these opportunities.
Exactly.
Rather than maybe, I think it would take a lot of time and might not be helpful to go through each column and try and update it here, but rather the sense of the committee members on what they view the most challenging hurdles for each one of these opportunities.
So let's,
just as a suggestion.
If I'm hearing you right, let's just go down through the site and open it up for discussion on what is the most critical challenge facing each of these. Does that work?
That would be my suggestion.
So let's start with the Yuma brackish mound.
Well, Wade's the first hurdle there.
What would you like to, where would you like to start? Actually, it's a non-starter.
Okay. No, and that's fair. That's what we want to. That's what we want to get on here. So there's resistance locally. The way I understand it, I wasn't at the last meeting of the committee, but there was going to be a plan to put together a meeting in Yuma, I believe. That meeting never happened. Is that correct?
I thought we did have a meeting. We had one or two where we talked about the report regarding groundwater and the groundwater mound. And that was discussed.
In the Yuma area? With the Yuma folks?
With the Yuma folks.
Okay.
Are you referring to the legislative listening session in March of 17, or are you talking about a meeting that you and Mr. Lotz had committed to host down in Yuma under the auspices of this committee?
That last meeting you talked about, we had committed, but subsequent discussions led us to believe that it would not be productive.
Okay.
Chairman, could I ask one question?
Yeah, please.
So it's probably obvious, Wade, but for the mound there, what was the primary objection? Just taking a water resource from the area and potentially bringing it somewhere else? Is that basic concerns there? I mean, is that a water supply that's being, as a groundwater supply being used currently, or just, I mean, maybe it's obvious for most, but...
For the most part, and Chuck and Bill can correct me, for the most part, the groundwater mound that we're discussing is situated under the Yuma Mesa division of the Gila project. And the districts therein have strong concerns about the water itself. Who has access to it, and what the right to use it would be. Others in the area have expressed equally strong concerns about it, including those in the Yuma Valley. So between the Yuma Valley folks and the Gila Valley folks, so far we haven't found a whole lot of acceptance to the concept of developing a desalination facility that would result in the export of that groundwater desalination. That's where we stand. And that has not moderated since 2008.
Yeah, appreciate that way. I assume that was sort of the case.
And the way I understood it, there was a local area water balance that may or may not play into this if we were to move 50,000 acre feet outside of the area. Is that correct?
That was part of it as well.
And so that would still need to be resolved. We need to provide some type of comfort to that. Benefits, locals. Was that even discussed? The Yuma area?
Without further work, I can't recall any particular benefits to the local area other than perhaps money.
Okay.
And that so far has not been a substantial enticement with regards to desalination or other possibilities of water being moved upstream.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could.
My recollection was that in addition to potential financial benefits, there was the opportunity to reduce drainage water impacts to the Yuma Valley and more consistent water quality as part of exchange water.
But I'm just stating that for the record. From CAP's perspective, if the Yuma interests are unwilling to engage in further discussions, I don't think it's this committee's place to ask or push for further engagement on this opportunity. Quite frankly, I think we have harder enough and challenging enough opportunities to try and convince folks who have a broad range of concerns to have a conversation.
As usual, Mr. Cullen has stated it succinctly and accurately. We concur with that. And we thought that's where we were.
Okay.
On the Yuma desal situation. So I recognize that it was in a most promising list before, and I was a little surprised to see it resurrected.
Well, and if it's number one on the list now, doesn't mean it can't move down the list to a lower option. And I'm fine doing that if you believe that we will be unsuccessful in enticing the Yuma area residents in any way. I just don't want to quickly dismiss all of these because they have one challenge or another, but I want to focus our efforts where they're most useful. Yes, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think Chuck has stated that. That's what we're hearing, and that position has not moderated
Okay.
among the voices that have spoken out regarding it.
If that changes in the future, please let us know.
Certainly.
Thanks, Wade.
A few years ago, our group did a rather detailed study into a concept that you probably all think is very wild regarding being valued to the people in Yuma. The concept that was considered was to desalinate the water that's being diverted out of the Colorado River for purposes of human consumption, purposes of reducing the salt in the water that's used for irrigation, allowing over a period of a long time, 8, 10, 20 years, who knows, allowing the amount of water that's used to water the crops to go dramatically down because the salt level in the water is dramatically reduced, encouraging other methods of irrigation such as sprinklers and that sort of thing. But the result being that would allow the people in the farmers in the Yuma area to grow more valuable crops. And the only problem that was raised by our team was the same problem you're going to have with all these. It's political. It's not economic necessarily as much as it is, it's not an economic issue so much as it is a political issue. But in any event, you were asking a question about something that would benefit the people in Yuma. Well, it could benefit the farmers in Yuma if you could reduce the amount of water that's needed to irrigate those crops. And you could do that based on what I was just trying to describe. Probably very ineffectively described, nevertheless.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll note that one and park it for now. Let's move on to the next one on the list, if for the sake of time. How about the West Salt River Valley? Let's have some discussion around that area. Who'd like to start? Bill?
It sounds like the first hurdle is that can it be on and without not becoming a waterlogged area, correct? So not a waterlogged area is available for withdrawals for desal. Don't know whether it's going to maintain that status, then what is the amount of water that could be extracted? Try to have a low tone as well, so that would be the initial concern I would have, is that if you can't withdraw water there, then it doesn't matter whether you can use desal or not.
Okay, so we need some regulatory clarification on what type of permit we would get for that site and what length of time we would have that permit, so if a project is built, it has its life cycle at least in mind, and so investors in such a water treatment plant would get a return on their investment. So we could ask for clarification from DWR on that particular matter. That's a good one.
But at what point it would not become waterlogged? So if there's been any modeling done, I don't know if the models have been updated to show, new growth and projections of water use, whether that's going to, by itself, cause it not to be waterlogged anymore. And what is the time period for that? And, is that he's trying to satisfy one problem and effectively exasperating an existing problem? I don't know.
Yeah. We can get with our GIS team, the modelers over here, and see what the status is on that.
It seems like an area that has been studied a lot, so I would assume that the model's either ready to show that or could be revised in such a way that we could show what's available for how long in that area.
And I remember DOR was also working on a study that we were...
It's a basin study on West Salt River Valley.
Okay, yeah. So, Chuck, do you know if... Well, John's on the phone right now. John, that was completed, correct?
That's been completed. We are still, it's essentially been completed. We're still waiting for the final transfer of the model files from the contractor, Southwest Groundwater, that did it. And we'll be happy to share those with the department when we finally get it. And I expected it a couple months ago. I think there's a few points that the modeler's working on cleaning up in the report, but we should have that real soon.
Okay. And John, do you know if that report touches on any of the things that Bill had just mentioned? Well, the things that are coming to mind for me, the short answer is, no. The model wasn't asking that particular question about the waterlogged area. We did, of course, when we were putting together scenarios, we had some different ideas about how to model that area. So what was coming to mind was it probably would need to have some new scenarios ginned up to ask the specific questions on that. For example, we some of the first runs we did, we had some wells down there, and they put a pretty big hole there pumping for potential buckeye growth, and we ended up moving them to some other locations. So the short answer, I guess, is we haven't really asked that precise question, and I would think two things. One is this model is certainly available to do that, but I would want to have, maybe ADWR model or even the contractor think about the applicability of the model to that particular question. Not sure if that makes sense. Thanks, John.
Sure.
Yeah, Chuck?
I think one of the central challenges for any brackish resource in the AMAs is the regulatory nature of that resource. There's one example here about whether it's a waterlogged area or not, but currently, if you pump water even at 3,000 TDS, it counts as a groundwater extraction, and there's no regulatory relief from that. So if this committee believes that brackish groundwater is a local resource that can augment supplies, we have a regulatory constraint in the current way groundwater is managed in the AMAs. And I think that's a question that will reappear even if it's a waterlogged area. It still has challenges under the way we regulate groundwater in the AMAs, because we don't consider the differences in water quality. And so same problem in Picacho, and trying to think where else we have it. Picacho, Eloy, and West Salt River Valley are the two within the original AMAs that could have this tension between an unused resource that requires investment and a regulatory constraint that makes it impractical. So I think that's something that occurs here, regardless of the outcome of the determination of waterlogged.
Do you know, has there been language drafted to change the rule? Or is it something that this committee would like to take a look at?
Well, so I'll answer the first part of the question. I don't believe this committee in its previous configuration evaluated the regulatory framework. I think it's a question that we might ask DWR to identify what the regulatory tension, and then we can talk about it, see if this group has a feeling about it.
Yes, if I may, it seems like it would be good to have a discussion in the future, maybe perhaps when the findings of the model are released, or even sooner with the AMA director, and have some regulatory discussions surrounding that, including if there has been language drafted on changing the way that the Buckeye waterlog area is regulated or managed. I don't know of any of that, but we can definitely look into that capacity. So maybe at a future meeting we can get into the weeds on that.
You might want to.
My suggestion would be to expand the inquiry, which is, does the Groundwater Management Act within the AMAs differentiate between brackish water or potable water in the regulatory space?
And could it?
And could it, right.
And I think they're two separate topics, I agree. The one about can there be different pools, or can we be allowed to pump brackish water, is different because we're looking at that across the state than the model, which is focused just on the West Valley.
Thanks, Phil.
Just help me, what is the regulatory hurdle with regard to water from the waterlogged area?
So it's my understanding, and I'll defer to the wise counsel of the department, but it's my understanding that if you pump that groundwater, you incur a replenishment obligation, meaning that you have to replace the groundwater that you just invested a lot of money to treat in, to go buy a supply to put back in the ground to replace the poor quality water that was unlikely to ever be used.
So the replenishment requirement is applicable for water extracted out of the ground, out of the Buckeye waterlogged area.
That's my understanding, but I don't know. I would defer to the department. I know if you pump groundwater within the AMA, incur a replenishment obligation, unless you have a certificate, and then why would you be doing it?
Yeah, so let's keep that as an action item to discuss that further.
Yeah, we had a conversation. When I say we, it was mostly the AMA director, Jerry Walker. She was part of that, and they had talked with Bob Lotz about this. So I'm going to see if I can dig up some information about that conversation and
that'd be great.
Share it with y'all. Yeah.
And we'll answer the funding.
Yeah. Because there's no.
We'll get back on that, but I have a feeling a lot of people are going to
Okay, very good.
Thanks, Philip.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else on the West Salt area? None?
Had there been a particular brine disposal method for this project that was more favorable?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I think that's going to be one of the biggest hurdles in this location. Maybe bigger than the regulatory one, or just as big as the regulatory one. We've had many conversations, I know, about different types of brine disposal. Anyone around the table can chime in here, but I don't think we've yet piloted a deep injection well. That could possibly be done as part of this group to try to open up brackish desal in this area. There's other conversations. I know Palo Verde's been talking to some folks in the area about evap ponds, leave some of their pond storage space. There was a group from Texas that came out and did a presentation on turning most of it into commodities so that there wouldn't be as much to dispose of. I don't know where they're at with their project in Texas, but last I was out there, it was not operating yet. It was constructed, but not fully operating. Does anybody have an update?
Operating, but there's still some issues.
Okay. Well, and that was a couple of years ago, so they've been working on issues for a while. But it may be worth visiting that plant and talking about what issues they have and if there's daylight at the end of the tunnel for that project and if it has potential in Arizona. Other ideas along the lines of what do we do with the brine?
It's my vague recollection that DEQ was working on primacy assumption on injection that could lead to a regulatory space for deep well injection. And I don't know where they are in that process.
Does anyone know?
Well, their bill on privacy for that topic was successful last year. I just don't know where they're at. Having the approval statute.
Could we
rulemaking? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Could we maybe follow up with DEQ and have them
I can do that.
comment on that?
Bring them in to address that.
That'd be great.
Meeting.
I think it'd be great if this state had a pilot project to see if deep well injection was possible in Arizona and how successful it would be. Okay, anything else on the West Salt River Valley area? If none, let's move on to the Yuma non-groundwater. So the mode.
May I begin by
Yes,
saying
please.
that the Yuma area folks generally support this.
Oh, really? Very good. So we have one in support. Any opposed? No, I'm just kidding. What's our biggest challenge with this?
Is reclamation on the line?
And yes, they are.
They own the plant. Maybe we should ask them.
We still own one.
And
maybe he disconnected.
Things that are stated in the chart, they're all pretty accurate.
Okay.
As to what the discussion should be and what the issues are. As you get over on the right-hand side, you start to lead into reclamation issues. And as you get to the far right-hand side, you talk about the political issues. Those are accurate. We do have severe challenges, even though this is a good opportunity. There's some challenges as to how to do this and get it done. We could go across the chart and talk about each of them if it would be productive for the committee, but as Chuck has said, accurately and succinctly, as is his mode.
All the way around to say mode? That's impressive, Wade. That is impressive.
Let's start with the top challenges. We don't have to go by line item by line item, but is the top challenge...
Let's go to the second column there, the cost.
Okay.
The cost is low because you don't have to do too much with it, but the problems are significant in just the two things that are stated there. In discharging the brine to the mode, you've got a problem because you have the Cienega de Santa Clara. And that represents an issue as far as in the environment is concerned. If you're going to decrease the amount of water that goes to the Cienega by desalting it, then, and continue to use the drain as a brine disposal conveyance, then you're going to likely increase the salinity in the Cienega. If you do that, that's going to create national problems, and as it says further on to the right, it's going to require consultation with Mexico to do this project. That doesn't mean you let them know what you're going to do. That means they have the ability literally to stop the project. So we have to figure out if there's some way to make it acceptable to get into it. And that's because of the high salinity that will be in the brine disposal, in the brine that's being disposed.
Please.
And I agree with Mr. Noble. I would say there's an even larger question that complicates this opportunity, which is it actually doesn't generate new water for use within Arizona. It simply reduces losses out of Lake Mead, which has an overall benefit, but it doesn't generate a supply that can be marketed to offset the cost of the project.
Yeah, the paper water is already happening, right?
Right.
So this would be real wet water, which we're short,
right,
in short supply of. So I understand the hurdle there, but I'm wondering if we can't get interest even if we have additional parties at the table, including other beneficiaries, which would be Nevada and California and perhaps.
Yeah, the historic, I agree. We have funded the operation of the plant before to demonstrate that it does have a green button that says go, and it can operate for its intended purpose to conserve water in Lake Mead that is otherwise lost. The parties in Arizona, California, and Nevada did fund that operation in 2009 through 2011 and generated about 33,000 acre-feet of water over that year-long period. It becomes complicated, so we have to just be clear that the benefit is to the Colorado River system and not to any individual water-short city, town, or multi-county conservation district.
And I think we might add there, hopefully Chuck agrees with me, if you put water back into the river from the desalination plant in the Yuma area, it either has to stay in the river or everybody has access to it. It's not something that can be used only in Arizona. It's not Arizona water.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's almost essentially like putting water in Lake Mead.
Yeah, it's a conservation project that way. I agree.
And so I'm hoping, at least I see it big picture-wise, that it benefits everybody.
Mm-hmm.
By having real water and not just paper water filling the area. Am I way off base?
No, I agree. The thought in my head is if it benefits everybody, then everyone
should pay.
Should contribute in some way.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
That's a wonderful concept, and I know why Chuck, are you ready for this, is chuckling. It's because if you have this on the table as part of an augmentation for Arizona, you're not likely to get contributions from the other states in order to operate the plant.
That's right. Yep. So the Californians will say, best of luck, Arizona, thank you for paying.
But if it
helps us comply with the Mexico Treaty and gives Mexico's share California benefits, don't they?
Right. Enough to pay. And you know, really we get over to the right-hand side here, and the problems we have is convincing the Bureau of Reclamation to act on this and get the money.
That's right.
And, you know, the pilot project that we did, that is the 3 states who put up buku bucks, just operate it and take a look at it and see if we could operate it. That is minuscule compared to what the overall cost of the 30-year operation plan would be. And I don't think the 3 states are going to jump in and do that under present conditions, and it certainly doesn't appear that the Bureau of Reclamation has any inclination to do it, because every time we talk to the local people, they look at us and say, I don't think it's going to happen. Now, there may be a change in administrations, but this administration and the last administration were not inclined to do this.
Is the Bureau not on?
If they are, they're on mute and not taking the button off.
They are not on mute. They are there, both Bureau people.
Would anyone from the Bureau like to comment?
This is John Rasmussen in the Phoenix office. Unfortunately, you know, I'm just don't feel qualified to comment on that. I think there might be someone from the Yuma office on, but I saw that they were having some problems with their speakers and being able to announce themselves, so maybe they can get that worked out, or alternatively, they could call in the phone number that's on the agenda if they're listening. So I don't have anything intelligent to add, sorry.
Okay, no worries.
Having said those things that may sound like they're a little negative, I believe that if we really could figure out a way to use the water to augment supply in Arizona, and we could fight off the other states saying, why would Reclamation spend money to augment supply in Arizona and not augment our states? That's the political issue. This would be a good project to get done. Just, you have to figure out how to get through that, and, you know, maybe we don't get to do some other things on the river that the other states would trade off on it, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough.
So does the problem really boil down to getting the others to participate in the cost? I mean, the Bureau, Nevada, California.
Yeah, I think so. That's the way I would start to think about it, is that it's a cost issue. We, the water users in the lower basin, have maintained since the 90s that it's the United States' responsibility to operate the plant and pay for that operation. And that's been the sort of the loggerheads that we've been at for 30 plus years. So if there's a way to restart that conversation with the United States, California, and Nevada, and funders in Arizona, I think it's you figure out a way to make that commitment before you take on the political and international challenges of then doing it. I don't think you work on the international piece unless you have enough support to actually make all that complicated effort worth it. Is that fair?
Yeah, it really is.
So does the... Go ahead.
Maybe we need to go back, Philip, and take a look for some in the room who may not understand how we got to where we are on the DCP. Now, as Mr. Plummer wrote the deal...
I mean, read it.
How was it that Reclamation was able to avoid operating the plant? And that was because they were able to substitute water and provide for Mexico without operating the plant. was the intent of the plant. We're going to desalinate water and provide higher quality water to Mexico. That was the deal. But because of the failure to line the Coachella Canal until last decade or so, then that water was able to be used for Mexico, and that helped out a great deal. But things have changed now, and that's why we're seeing an increased pressure. It wasn't that we weren't without pressure during all those intervening 60 years or so, about what it was, Bill? 50? Yeah, 50 years. But there were alternatives that worked out as good or better than operating the plant. And quite appropriately, Reclamation said there's no need to spend that kind of money to operate the plant if we're able to do something that satisfies the needs that we have. Mexico agreed, Mexico accepted, but the pressure has been continual from especially the three lower basin states to operate the DCP and
the YDP.
The YDP, thank you.
Oh.
And so far we haven't been able to get it done.
There is an opportunity with the DCP, since we're pitching out acronyms, because the United States has made a commitment in the drought contingency plan to conserve 100,000 acre-feet of water for the benefit of the system. It's still not clear at all where they're going to get the money to make good on that commitment. I will point out that the cost of water conservation with agriculture is now in the $250 per acre-foot range since the Colorado River Indian tribes and the Gila River Indian community have set the marketplace in the DCP context. So the crossover point for YDP is within reach. When CAP, Southern Nevada, and MET operated the plant, the operating costs were about $300, $320 per acre foot, and that's probably still a good number, a reasonable number, given the power market and chemical market. So I think that's a long way, and I apologize.
No, you're good.
To say, I think it's useful to keep this as an opportunity to firm Colorado River water, but we need to think about it in terms of funding before we burn a lot of energy thinking about the interstate issues. So that's where that would be my suggestion to the committee.
So would the committee like to have a conversation with the Bureau of Rec, maybe even the other states, to see if we can get this thing funded?
I'd start with Reclamation and have the conversation in the context of the drought contingency plan commitment.
Probably at our next meeting.
Okay. Cindy, do you,
work on that, yeah.
and if you're having issues, let me know. I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
Yeah, this is John. I can help facilitate that too if you need some help, Cindy.
Okay, thank you, John.
Great, thank you. And I agree, it's probably step two to talk to Mexico and the NGOs, but let's just talk about that a little bit in the context of, we did a pilot. The pilot was successful.
Yep.
Did you study the effects on the Cienega or other concerns?
We did. The funders, CAP, Metropolitan, and Southern Nevada, funded around $300,000 worth of monitoring and investigation before, during, and after the operation of the pilot run. And the report led by the fellow down at U of A, whose name escapes me. Anyway, it was a while ago. The report showed that the water chemistry delivered to the Cienega did increase in total dissolved solids, which is what freshman chemistry teaches us that we should expect. And that there were no significant impacts to the vegetation and the flora and fauna of the Cienega for the pilot run. And so that was the principal conclusion. That was operating at 1/3 capacity.
Okay.
So it is not known really how the Cienega responds with higher volumes of brine blended into the discharge. But we know if we operate above 1/3 that it'll go up more than it did during the 1/3 operation.
What about long-term effects?
The report indicated that there are several factors that impact the health of the Cienega. Most of them are external on water quality, fire, local activities in the area, hunting, fishing, I mean, all those things. There isn't a salt loading problem in the Cienega because it gets the tidal influence to sort of clean it out, if that's what you were...
Dilution.
Yeah. So at least 3 times a year, when you have the super high tides, it comes in and just cleans it out.
What's our tidal salt load? What is it? Salt load on ocean water?
Down there, it's about 36 to 40,000 parts. Yeah, it's higher because it's shallow and saltier, or shallow and warmer. Yeah.
So, in your opinion, if we kept it around 1/3?
I'm sorry?
I'll give Bill a second. In your opinion, if we kept it around 1/3, we may be successful with Mexico, and
we certainly have a data point that indicates that the impacts are minor. Okay. The report that Carl Flessa did, right there. So proud of myself.
And then if we want to increase it above that, we probably need to pilot it to see what the effects are?
I think we probably, that would be my expectation, that Mexico, that when we go through the environmental analysis, that folks would want to study that before committing to a long-term operation.
Okay.
I think that would make the most sense for everybody. I just want to be clear, the Cienega is a very important environmental resource for both the United States and Mexico. It has the largest population of clapper rails, which are federally listed in both countries, in the United States and Mexico, and it's the largest population in the region. The birds freely migrate in and out of the Cienega up into Yuma and the lower Colorado River. It's an important resource for the folks who live in that region for hunting and fishing, and potentially it's important for the most endangered sea mammal, the vaquita, which is a small porpoise that lives in the upper Gulf, the upper Sea of Cortez. It's mostly imperiled by shrimp fishing, but folks could express concerns about changing water chemistry might have an impact as well. That wasn't observed in the 1/3 run.
Yeah.
But I think we just need to be aware of it.
So, on the opposite side of the spectrum, the full capacity listed here, 91,000. Did the study say whether that was likely to happen again, given everything that,
It was not considered.
okay,
No, we were just focused on the 1/3 operation.
okay. Very good, thank you. Other things to consider with the Yuma mode. All right, we have 15 minutes to talk about the other 4. We'll try to go through them relatively quickly, but highlight the major challenge. Winslow Loop, kind of tied to a tribal settlement, we think. Okay. I think that would highlight the biggest challenge there. And if we see movement towards a settlement, I think that's one that can move up our list. But until we see movement towards a settlement, I'm not sure it moves. Anyone agree or disagree? Seeing a couple nods. We can, anything else before we move on to Gila Bend?
There's also the infrastructure that would be needed to reach like adjacent communities. The disbursement.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of larger acre homes, so distribution will be. Good point. Gila Bend. Biggest challenge for that area.
Well, the sustainability of the supply, obviously, of concern.
So this is outside the AMA, is that correct?
I think this is, we were targeting demand of large farming operations and the Phoenix AMA.
Outside the AMA,
But it's outside the AMA.
Yeah, that's...
AMAs.
So, yeah. So one of the things we said here in the regulatory legal issues was the regulatory hurdles transporting treated water from Gila Bend into the Phoenix AMA.
Groundwater transfer between basins.
Yeah.
So there's a regulatory constraint?
Yeah.
It's a crime?
Is that what you're saying?
Whoa.
It's just not legal.
Subject to damages.
Thank
No
you.
one wants to embrace.
Like, changed.
Well, it seems like there's a regulatory constraint.
And that kind of gets back to the idea of brackish groundwater regulated the same or differently than groundwater that's groundwater in the AMA.
Okay.
Versus contaminated groundwater cleanup, right? Like TCE or whatever, right? Maybe we just need to drop some TCE in there. Please don't put that in the record. That was Chuck Collin, by the way.
Wow. Just for the record, the session law that allows transfer of treated, remediated water has an expiration date. But I would emphasize that if we wanted to incentivize treatment and transfer of any kind of low-quality water, we would start with changing the statute that says you can't transfer between basins. And maybe we could transfer between basins for narrow purposes. But boy, everyone in this room and 5,000 other stakeholders would have to carefully massage that, because the treatment and transfer of water in Superfund sites has attracted a lot of attention.
So is that something this committee would like to look at?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Chuck and I are trying to change the tenor of the meeting. Yes, we would like to look at that.
Okay. So let's take a look at that regulatory hurdle and what it would take to overcome that one. Maybe drafting some language that's going to get, I agree, critiqued a lot, but at least it's a step that direction. Wilcox Playa? Anything additional that's not listed here? Or the Picacho, Eloy area?
It doesn't seem that anything that is listed there needs to be changed.
Okay.
I think it accurately brings into play the various issues, the positives and the less than positive situation.
Very good. So, as we consider these target areas and these challenges, and we set goals for this committee, would we like to rearrange which areas we target, such as move the mound, lower the number one?
If you just stopped at move the mound. Well, so let me,
go ahead.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, it seems that there's some questions that we might get some more information on before we went through a reprioritization process that I think would help inform where we want to spend the committee's time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we heard, a request for Reclamation to provide some additional information about their plans to operate the Yuma desalting plant, the Department of Water Resources, and
DEQ.
And DEQ on some regulatory
for brine disposal.
Yeah, brine disposal, the waterlogged area, and the regulatory nature of brackish water within and without AMAs. And once we have that information, it might help sort of reshuffle this list.
Okay.
That's just one observation.
Yeah, and
we have the next meeting.
I'm good with that. Yeah. It gives us some time to think about this list too,
mm-hmm.
and come back with additional thoughts before we reprioritize. So I'm fine with that. We have plenty of action items, plenty of work to do between now and the next meeting.
Has the next meeting date, Mr. Chairman, been set?
No, it hasn't. So that'll be next. What's a good date for everyone?
Do we want to get it in before the next council meeting?
I would like to, if it works with everyone's calendar.
That's September 12th.
Shall we shoot for mid-August?
Can we shoot for the first week in August?
Yeah, I think the second week's bad. Yeah.
The second week's a bad week for me.
Then the first week is a bad week.
Third week?
So to be clear, are we talking about August 12th through the 16th, or the 19th through the 23rd?
19th through the 23rd.
Okay. That actually works right now. It's crazy. Thursday, the 22nd?
That works for me.
Right, works for me.
If I may.
Yeah.
Since I have to organize that, all of this, let me check on availability of facility, of meeting room, and I can do that in the next hour or so, and then I can send out a confirmation date to everyone.
Does this time work for everyone? Time of day? Okay.
So that's the 22nd, August 22nd, 10 to 11:30.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions or comments before we close the meeting?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for stepping in to the breach on what is a challenging conversation. I appreciate APS willing to lend you to us, and certainly enjoyed Mr. Lotz in his role. So congratulations for continuing on in that, and I know CAP, we're interested in helping as much as we can.
Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate that.
And before we close, excuse me, I just saw that the Yuma office is able to respond now. Actually, they told me that about 20 minutes ago, and I'm just now catching it.
Okay.
If there's something specific before we close that you wanted to ask them?
At this point, we could almost table it for the larger discussion at the next meeting, I think, unless somebody has something that is critical for today. But we appreciate them being willing to comment. Yeah, Wade.
For those of you who may not have participated in the previous desalination committee meetings, I hope you'll take the majority of the comments that were made today as being that we are negative on desalination. We have worked through a lot of these issues, and this is a tough thing to look at. When we really come down to it, there might be one or two practical projects that make sense. But we're glad to go back through the process as long as we don't have to do it as much as we did before.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate that. With that, we'll close the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Noble, good to see you.